I remember when I arrived at my first orphanage in Accra, Ghana, to profile children in orphanages across the country. My leader from the Department of Social Welfare asked me to find all the kids under the age of 2. So I'm really excited because I love babies, and I walk to the nursery, and they open the door, and immediately I hear crying, lots of crying. And as I walk past a row of cribs, babies are screaming and jumping for me to hold them. I walk further inside, and I see 20 babies lying on one blanket, 20 on the next, crooked diapers, poop and pee everywhere. And later I see 3 women watching these 40 babies, 3 women feeding and nurturing 40 babies. Sometimes my coworkers and I were so swarmed by compassion-starved children that fights would break out over kids just wanting attention. Frequently, pictures such as these are shown on fundraising brochures of overseas charities that own and operate orphanages. If you don't look closely, it's easy to miss that their smiles aren't all natural and they don't reflect healthy play. Research from UNICEF says that growing up in an orphanage can lead to over a 20-point IQ hit, delays in emotional and social development, and aggressive behavior problems. Research also shows that a caretaker-to-child ratio of no more than 1:8 is preferred to raise a child, which is another way of saying that children grow up best in family units. When I was young, for me, overseas charities and nonprofits always seemed to have a positive impact on the lives of others. But what I'm about to tell you really challenged my view of what it means to give. In 1985, Ghana had a total of 3 orphanages, all official and controlled by the government. The truth is that Ghana doesn't really need a lot of orphanages. It has a relatively prosperous economy with an impressive tribal cultural history of wider family structures than simply taking children in. At least that's how it used to work. For reasons that I'm struggling to understand, it became a fad in Western giving circles to create and sponsor orphanages in Ghana and in many parts of Africa without asking if that was even needed. So that by 2005, just a few decades later, over 200 foreign-sponsored orphanages had been built, and more continue to spring up all the time. And certainly the number of orphans didn't grow during this time, but orphan beds had to be filled, salaries of the workers had to be paid, fundraising brochures needed group photos in order to continue getting donations. You can see where this is going. More and more orphanage directors began offering incentives to family members to give up their children, such as schooling and money. And once acquired, children were seldom, if ever, reunited with their families. This statistic still blows my mind. 80% of children in orphanages in Ghana are not actually orphans, but have family members who could raise them. So it seems like we should reunite children with their families when possible, and for those that don't have families, we should find them. This is exactly what the government in Ghana set out to do, but they needed some help. I am the National Student Director of an organization called Kaeme. Kaeme means remember me in Ghanaian Twi. Since 2009, Kaeme has formally partnered with the Department of Social Welfare in Ghana to execute together on their care reform initiative. The Kaeme story actually begins with one of my new heroes, Helena Oveng Asamoah. Early in her career, Helena was the director of one of the original orphanages in Ghana. And since 2005, she began recognizing this growing orphanage epidemic, and she fashioned a plan to fix it, called the Care Reform Initiative. After garnering local internal support in her department, she began to look for international partners who could energize her solution. 3 years later, she found entrepreneur and cardiac surgeon John Stevens and his wife Marcy Stevens, who had recently adopted their daughter Perpetua from Ghana. They in turn reached out to the Be a Good Doctor and beagoodleader.org incubators, who in turn train and mentor students like me to lead their initiatives. Working together, Kaeme and the Department of Social Welfare aim to find a loving family for every child. To do this, we are interviewing every child in every orphanage in Ghana, one child and one orphanage at a time. At the orphanage level, we will have screened every undocumented orphanage within several years. Once screened, the next steps of the Care Reform Initiative are fairly straightforward. The minority of outright abusive orphanages will close and legal action will be taken. And we recognize that some international NGOs may simply decide to leave, but we hope that many of the foreign-sponsored orphanages will stay and keep their energy and resources in the country and become part of the Care Reform Initiative. So here's the plan. 40 of the former undocumented orphanages will be transformed into new homes, each in Ghana's 10 districts, 4 of each. So one, we will have a transitional home where true orphans will stay no longer than 6 months before finding them a permanent family, but other roles include a shelter for abused women, a mother and children's home, and lastly, a home for children with special medical needs. But we're not finished yet, because many of the former orphanages who can't take one of these roles can become the community centers and schools and other kinds of establishments that truly support the children of Ghana. I began as National Student Director with Kaeme a few years ago with the 2 Kaeme co-founders and founding medical student Jennifer Miller. And in that time, we have been able to document over 1,000 children. Many of the abusive orphanages have been closed, and over 300 children have been reunified with their families. Our mission is simple: for every child, a loving home. Loving homes come in many shapes and sizes. For those that have families, we hope to simply reunify them with their families, and for those that do not, they will either go into foster care or adopted families. Our first priority is local adoption, but we recognize that there are millions of families worldwide who would be willing to take a child in. I've learned many lessons from my time with Kaeme, and the first is that as individuals and organizations, we should pick our problems carefully and thoughtfully. We live in one of the most entrepreneurial and creative nations in history. All the more, we should put as much energy and time into giving our money away as we did into earning it. And certainly, we should never fix problems that didn't exist in the first place and risk creating havoc in distant countries by thinking that we know better with our quick solutions. Second, as college students in the Silicon Valley, we often want to be the founders and create solutions to the problems that we see, even asking the question in a way that centers around us: how can I fix this? This can be a very dangerous mindset when we want to solve problems in distant countries with cultures very different from our own. We shouldn't always look to create solutions ourselves, but rather find and energize the local leaders who are unlocking their own communities. We have to find the Helenas of the world. There are nearly 1 million Americans who volunteer abroad every year. If we focus our time and energy into picking the right problems and finding the best local leaders, we really can move mountains. Thank you.